this video, I'm going to talk to you about the OSR. And it's not going to be a you should stop playing other games to play the OSR. It's really about, has the OSR gone a bridge too far? And what I mean by that is the plethora of OSR games that are out there, fantasy games specifically is what I'm talking to. And how many of them do we really need? Now keep in mind, I'm not bashing any one game. I guess in order to get into this, first let's talk about why I believe we have so many of them. So, for those of you who don't know, just a quick refresher, there's a lot of information. I've got videos on the OSR, so do lots of other people. Check it out if you're interested in it. OSR is old school Renaissance, old school revival, old school role-playing. And it basically started as a way to use the older systems or revamp the older systems of D&D, retro-clone them, so on and so forth, and make them a little more modern, better layout, better art, objectively, and make them a little easier for people to pick up and play. Also, putting them in print. This is done through the fact that Wizards of the Coast in 3rd edition created the Open Gaming License and put it out. And because of the Open Gaming License, anybody can take older editions of D&D. You can't call it D&D, obviously. We learned in a previous video there are things called copyrights and trademarks, and you can't use those. There are certain monsters that you can't use. You can reskin them, but you can't use those monsters by name. So it leaves people, it leaves them with the ability to self-publish their own version of old school D&D, which is what it has done a lot of. So I think two things are major contributing factors to why we have so many different fantasy OSR games. The first being, it's very easy in this day and age to self-publish. And not just self-publish, but you can self-publish adventures, self-publish entire rule books or sets or whatever, as long as you're obeying the Open Game License and giving credit wherever it's due, you know, to Matt Finch or whoever you need to give credit to in the video, or not in the video, I'm the one making the videos, whoever you need to give credit to in the book. So being able to self-publish the way we do now with print on demand and whatnot, it's just really easy for people to pick up and get their own stuff printed. So that allows you to get stuff out there on DriveThruRPG, Amazon, what have you, and get it into people's hands. There's a complete distribution chain and publishing process that was not there in the 70s and 80s for the most part for D&D or for any small-time publisher or aspiring author who wanted to write a role-playing book or a novel for that matter. Anything you wanted to do, you had to go to a publisher and find somebody who would publish you. And now you can do it yourself. So that has helped in getting a lot of books out there. But I think one of the reasons, more specifically, that we have so many fantasy OSR games out there is the original rule set for D&D was kind of open-ended. There were a lot of holes in it. Some of it, I think, on purpose, and some of it just because it wasn't things that had come up and it had not dawned on the creators, and they didn't really have a lot of games to look around at for inspiration for how to lay out and do a game back then, because, you know, D&D was the granddaddy of them all. So what you ended up with was, because there were certain holes in the rules and the fact that we didn't have internet, so we weren't in constant communication with each other, everybody, whoever you want to talk to, is just a click away. You had all of these referees, game masters, or dungeon masters, whatever, that were playing in their home games, or at a friend's house, or whatever. And each one of them would come up with different ways to do certain things within the game. Each of them would come up, with, well, this is how I do ability checks to represent skills, or this is how I have my players roll their stats, and this, that, and the other. So everybody back then who played D&D in the 70s and 80s, for sure, most of us played it just a little bit different than the table next to you. And they played it a little bit different than the table next to them. Now, the base of the game, understand, was the same. But because you had all these GMs, game masters, dungeon masters, referees, we don't want to leave anybody out, doing their own thing, everybody put their own tweak and their own spin on it, for the most part. So we fast forward a little bit to now, when we can, print our own stuff, and because of the open game license, we can now take the original D&D rules, we can apply the tweaks that we made back in the day to them, and then we can publish it. And I feel like that's one reason that you have so many different ones. For one thing, you have people who are like, hey, I can do this, so I will do this. So, okay, they're going to publish an RPG, they're going to publish a retro clone of D&D. Sure, cool, whatever. But why so many of them? You've got, and I cannot name all of them, there are so many. You've got Osric, you've got Basic Fantasy, you've got White Box, you've got Swords and Wizardry, you got Labyrinth Lore, Castles and Crusades, and just on and on. Blue Home, there's just all these different ones. Golden Glory. Now, this also breaks into a couple of different aspects. Some of these are retro clones of the original, like, BX and OD&D and stuff like that, and Beckney and whatnot. And then you have some that are clones of, first edition, AD&D second edition, so on and so forth. But most of them are fairly compatible. And if you have to do any tweaks at all between game systems, there's usually only one or, just a couple of things that this is a little bit different here, this is done a little bit different here. And it's very easy to swap back and forth. For instance, I love Basic Fantasy. I love White Box. I'm currently playing a lot of White Box because I really enjoy the tweaks to the rules that are in that. But I've also used several of my Basic Fantasy adventures with that set of rules. And it's been very minute tweaks. And stuff usually that I can just do on the fly. Oh, okay. Change that to D6s. There we go. Boom. So a lot of it is really, really compatible with each other. So why do we need so many of them? Well, honestly, we don't need any of them. But we don't need more and more fantasy clones. I personally like to get these things and read them, and I have some that I've read and I've shelved them. They're not, because of the way what changes they made, it just didn't really appeal to me, or it didn't appeal to me enough to make me switch. And I'm not going to switch and play a different set of fantasy rules, every 2 or 3 months just because somebody has a different little tweak in this one or that one. But I found one that I like. Most of the rules work, and like I said, you can change stuff on the fly. But I personally like to read the other ones because you do get ideas for how you're going, how things you would like to do in your game. I'd love to read the full Swords and Wizardry. James talks a lot about this Adventure Conqueror King. It sounds interesting. Wouldn't mind taking a look at that. There's several of them on the Amazon wish list for this channel. Link in the description. But I don't know that I would run all of them, but I might read them and be like, oh, I really like this system they have for jousting. I'm going to take that and use it in my game. And I do cobble a lot of stuff together for games. So that's really cool that we have the option to do that. That being said, I'm probably not going to switch from White Box to Lion and Dragon, or switch from Lion and Dragon to Adventure Conqueror King. I would have to read them they would have to really blow me away to get me to change games, but I would probably use stuff out of them in the games I currently run. And we have a lot of that to choose from. There's a lot of those games out there to choose from. And I have not read them all. I have read probably 4 or 5 different ones now. And I do like a lot of what I read. I've only looked at one that I didn't really care for that much. And I'm not going to get into that right now because that's not really the point. But my point is, how many different fantasy versions do we need? Don't we have enough out there now that you can really cobble together whatever kind of old school game that you want to do? And I'm specifically speaking to these retro clones, not the rule cyclopedia or actual BX. If you're lucky enough to have that stuff, that's great. And yes, I understand you can download it. I'm talking about physical copies because I don't like to run off of PDFs. But I feel like we probably don't need more fantasy retro clones. And I'm not trying to shoot down anybody's who I didn't mention or I'm unaware of, because I'll read any of it. I love to read, and I have totes full of books over here. I'll read these game books. Well, I'm not going to use that again, but I did enjoy the read. And it'll go in the box. Eventually, maybe I need to do like a giveaway or something, and like just send some of this back out into the community. And also understand that when I'm talking about we don't need any more fantasy retro clones, in my opinion, I feel like we've gone a bridge too far with the OSR. But I'm not speaking to adventures and things like that. I'm writing one myself to go up on Drive-Thru-RPG. Lots of people write adventures that are compatible with White Box, or Sword and Wizardry, or Labyrinth Lore, whatever. They put their own adventures up, and that's fine if you want to buy pre-made adventures and run them as is, or pull stuff from them and use them, whatever. That's very easy to do, and I'm all for having more and more adventures out there. But I don't think we need more rule sets. So it beckons the question of what else would we do with the OSR? Well, what I would like to see, personally, there are some publishers out there that have already done this and done a very good job of it, in my opinion. So you have the base mechanics from old school D&D, and you can work with that. We don't need any more fantasy games. We got plenty of fantasy games to choose from. So what else can we do with it? Well, look at Bloat Games. If you have not checked any of their stuff out, I highly recommend it. I'm not telling you to play it, just highly recommending their stuff, because their Survive This system, which they use for a lot of different settings, is really, really good. It's based on old school D&D with a little bit of new school D&D thrown into it as well. All legitimate by the Open Game License. And they put out fantastic games like Dark Places and Demogorgons. Dark Places and Demogorgons is one of my favorite games. It's very, very easy. feels like you're playing D&D, but you're playing kids in the 80s. And there are strange things happening everywhere. And I really like it. They have the successor, spiritual successor to it, which I should be getting soon, which is We Die Young. And that moves the game up into the 90s in the, I believe, in the Seattle grunge scene. And it adds all kinds of stuff you can do with it. You can play werewolves, vampires, fairies, created, all kind of crazy stuff. But you could literally run a Vampire Masquerade knockoff game with it if you wanted to. I have the PDF of it. It's really cool. The stuff they put out, they have one that's more modern investigative horror, I think, is the way it came across. It's a 2-book one that's the Kickstarter was successful, and it should be coming out, I don't know, end of the year, beginning of the year, whatever. Called What Shadows Hide. It looks phenomenal. And all of this is using the OSR, or the open game license that created the OSR, basically, to put other skins on it besides fantasy. You get Dark Places and Demogorgons, which is your Stranger Things style, Goonies style, and then you have We Die Young, which is more, you can do all kind of stuff with it. You can do, like, Lost Boys, or werewolf, or whatever. And then you have What Shadows Hide, which is one of the books is a Cthulhu book, so I'm assuming it's going to be Cthulhu investigative stuff. But all of that's using this open game license, the same thing that was used to create all these fantasy games. You have Operation White Box, World War II. You've got White Star, which is kind of Star Wars. You have Eldritch Tales. I cannot remember the name of the company that did it, but it's a gorgeous book. And it's literally the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, but skinned over old school D&D rules. So that's what I would like to see personally. I would like to see more companies take other settings and apply these rules to them. And no, the rules aren't the same exactly from book to book. They may change a little bit here and there. But I would like to see more of that. Just because I don't need 35 different fantasy games, different versions of D&D. I just don't need that many of them. Resource books, adventures, give me that. Give me other settings. I love the stuff by Bloat Games. I've been reading the Operation White Box. It's really cool. It's World War II, so I'm not going to get my wife to play it. But that's my opinion on it. Is we don't need more fantasy rules that are just separated by a couple of tweaks here and there. If you want to do something really crazy and write your own fantasy game with your own system and doesn't have anything to do with the OGL, sure, go for that. That's cool. Whatever. I might check that out because I like different systems. I like different mechanical systems. It's why I don't just play one game or run one game. I love Aliens. I love Rift, Savage Worlds, so on and so forth. I love a lot of this different stuff. And I like to have a lot of variety because I'm not going to sit here for a year straight and just run a fantasy game. I love fantasy, but there's also so many options out there now to do other stuff with. So that would be, I don't really have I have some suggestions, but I probably shouldn't put them on a video, of ideas for things games you could make using the OGL. But this is just listing off a couple of them here that I happen to have and I really like. And I hope to see a lot more from Bloat Games. I'm sure I will. They take my money on their Kickstarters quite frequently. So, I don't know. Is there other game settings that you would like to see using the OGL? If there is, and you want to talk about it openly, put it in the comments. Or, let's talk about it on Rob's Game Group on Facebook. That's it. It's not really a rant video or anything super exciting. It got me thinking the other day because I look at all these different fantasy games and I was like, Yeah, but I like this other stuff too. I'd like to see some other things skinned around this. So, or if there's other OGL skinned games or settings that you think are really cool, put that kind of stuff in the comments too, because I want, maybe I don't know about it and I want to go look it up. And that's about it for this one. Well, I hope that you found something in that video useful or something you could take away from it. Either way, I appreciate you watching this long. Don't forget that we have the link to the Amazon wish list for Rob's Game Group in the description of every video now. You can click on that, check out the wish list. If there's product on there that you want to see me review, you can always purchase it. Amazon will do all the work, ship it to me, and it helps me help you help me make videos for everybody to enjoy. Also like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. And until next time, my friends, good gaming and good luck.